ICE didn't just kill Alex Preddy. They exposed a lie that's told by both American political parties. We're told that ICE is there to protect us. But if you look at the injustice in Minnesota and every city across the country, ICE is not protecting anyone. They are there to enforce fear. The only solution to a domestic terrorist organization like ICE is full abolition. On January 24th, 2026, federal immigration agents shot and killed Alex Preddy, a 37-year-old ICU nurse during ICE operations in Minneapolis. Video evidence and eyewitness testimony show that Preddy never discharged his legally owned firearm. He was helping other protesters when agents tackled him to the ground. Agents removed his gun from his hip, which removed any threat that the agents claimed was there, and then shot 10 shots into him, six into his motionless body. And instead of rendering aid, they counted his bullet wounds as he lay there dying. That is a live streamed execution that the entire country saw. But this wasn't an isolated event. This happened less than 3 weeks after Renee Good was shot in the face by Jonathan Ross, a 37-year-old poet and mother of three. Two killings in the same city by the same federal agency. 66% of the homicides in Minnesota this year alone have been from ICE agents. These killings all happened under Operation Metro Surge, which was a Trump administration raid flooding Minneapolis with thousands of federal agents. We can see in these videos the tactics that ICE is using on civilians. Most of this is banned in international warfare, and they're doing this to civilians. They're shooting people with pepper spray point blank. They're doing chokeholds on people that are just standing there observing ICE. They are a paramilitary group that is being utilized on American citizens. We need to call this out for what it is. Jacob Fry has traveled to DC demanding that this ends. Governor Tim Walz had said that other cities are going to be next. And when Donald Trump was asked about it, he said that it hasn't gone far enough. We need more enforcement like this, where women are being pushed to the ground or gassing communities. They gassed a preschool just last week. Both parties recognize that there needs to be accountability for the federal crimes that are committed by ICE and that there has to be some change in order to calm down tensions. Republican Senators Tom Tillis and Lisa Murkowski have called for Kristi Noem to resign, calling her incompetent, terrible at her job, escalating and fueling the flames of increased tensions in most of these cities. And many Democrat politicians have called ICE, like Ayanna Pressley has said, ICE are rogue mass operatives who terrorize and kill our neighbors without due process. But there are few politicians that are going as far to say what the solution needs to be done, which is full abolition. ICE is not a safety agency. It is a fear enforcer. Ilhan Omar has said, we must abolish ICE. This moment demands it. This is the moderate position. We know Ilhan Omar is correct at calling for ICE's abolition. It is a lawless agency. Since January alone, Patrick Schultz, a U.S. district judge, has said that ICE has violated 96 court orders. How can an agency violate court orders and demands and then call itself law enforcement? Make it make sense. A federal judge also had to issue an emergency order to stop ICE from destroying evidence of its own crimes. There are two lies that are typically used by both Republicans and some Democrats to justify ICE's continued existence. The first one is ICE prevents crime in our local communities. This is verifiably false, both from immigrants' rights groups and right wing organizations like the Cato Institute. They said an estimated 1,617,197 native born Americans, 67,813 illegal immigrants, and 58,515 legal immigrants were incarcerated in 2023. The incarceration rate for native born Americans was 1,221 per 100,000, 613 per 100,000 for illegal immigrants, and 319 per 100,000 for legal immigrants in 2022. Illegal immigrants are half as likely to be incarcerated as native born Americans. Legal immigrants are 74% less likely to be incarcerated than natives. If native born Americans were incarcerated at the same rate as illegal immigrants, about 806,000 fewer natives would be incarcerated. Conversely, if natives were incarcerated at the same rate as legal immigrants, about 1.2 million fewer native born Americans would be incarcerated. This is the total data in the chart. Again, they are taking it from proportionality. These are percent aggregates. I know a lot of right wingers try to say, "Oh, there's more native born people than there are undocumented immigrants." That's true, which is why we're looking at this proportionally. Illegal immigrants, 613 per 100,000, significantly less, more than half less than native born Americans. Illegal immigration does not spike crime. There are people that commit crime, obviously. Again, the percentages is about 613 per 100,000 residents for for undocumented immigrants. Nobody is saying that those people should not be held accountable for crimes. But we already have agencies that go after those types of crimes. For drug smuggling, we have the DEA. For violent criminals, we have the FBI. We don't need an additional agency that doesn't provide security because we know that ICE, 70%, over 70% of detainees have no violent criminal record. That means that their whole job is just deporting as many people as possible. It doesn't matter the criminality status, it doesn't matter what crimes they've committed. It is all about fear tactics. The second lie that's told is undocumented immigration decreases wage growth and hurts the American working class. Another unverified claim. If we look at this chart, this shows the gap between productivity and a typical worker's compensation since 1948. So early on, as you can see, it heavily correlated. The blue line is worker pay, the dark blue line is productivity for employers. Early on, it met at around the same rate. There was heavy correlation between the amount that workers were getting paid and the amount that they were producing for their employer. But things spiked heavily in 1980. You can see the huge difference where wages stagnated and productivity boomed. In 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected. That's when we saw a neoliberal turn in American economics, where labor unions were busted, where wages were cut, and corporations squeezed as much as they could in order to minimize costs. Corporations de facto view labor as cost. It's just part of their overall calculation and how much profits they're able to accumulate. Therefore, they want to decrease the amount of wages as much as they're able to get away with, which is why we started to see this sharp disparity in wage growth and productivity. This has nothing to do with undocumented immigrants. This has everything to do with corporate greed and capitalist instinct. ICE does not help the working class. And if anything, it really helps the owning class. So many agricultural conglomerates and employers across the country utilize the cheap undocumented labor that comes here, and they threaten them with ICE if they try to speak out on skimped wages, if they try to unionize, if they try to collectively bargain with their fellow workers. All of that is stopped by the threat of ICE, which keeps people in line. Desperate workers are cheap workers. That is the mantra of most conglomerates across the country that utilize undocumented labor. When one worker of groups is terrorized, all workers lose leverage. It is less cohesive as a collective bargaining tool if you have some workers that aren't able to speak out in fear of being deported. ICE is literally just a union busting tool with guns. Anytime you talk about abolishing ICE, people will say, ICE keeps us safe from criminals. Not true. Violent crime is handled by FBI and local law enforcement. Abolishing ICE means open borders. Not true. Border Patrol already exists. ICE didn't even exist until 2003. It was an agency that was developed in post 9/11 in our most heightened paranoia era. It is used as a fear tactic, the same as the TSA, the same as the DHS. It is a post 9/11 Patriot Act style agency. They say that ICE fights trafficking and drug smuggling. Not true. Even ICE's own investigators asked to be separated from deportation raids because they undermine real investigations. We can fight crime without terrorizing families and ripping them apart. ICE has no need for that. We already have agencies that can handle crime. None of this is new information for the people of Minnesota. They have been actively demanding changes from their government for the past couple of weeks, ever since these two unjust killings. And this has yielded real world results. Don't ever let someone tell you that protesting does nothing. It's just people in the street chanting and waving signs. No, that's not true. When you demand things from your government and you pair those demands with economic disruption, like we've seen with the two general strikes that have happened both weeks, you get real world changes. This is reporting from today at CBS News. Border Czar says feds will withdraw 700 law enforcement personnel from Minnesota immediately. Border Czar Tom Homan said Wednesday federal authorities will draw down 700 law enforcement personnel in Minnesota immediately. The news comes a day after the state's top corrections official told CBS News there have been conversations with the federal government, including with people who report to Homan. This is real world results. This is people that are demanding change from their government, and those demands are somewhat being heard. This isn't everything that needs to be done. We need the full abolition of ICE. And while that will not happen in the Trump administration, I can guarantee it, this needs to be the leading conversation that Democrats are saying across the country. We need to spark that momentum in communities where ICE is continuing to abuse people. We need to say that in conversations that they have with Republican officials and showing what their vision is for the future. And the 2028 election and the 2026 election needs to be led by hard, staunch Democrats who stand on their convictions and say that ICE is a terrorist organization that is hurting our communities more than it is helping them. Alex Preddy should still be alive. Renee Good, should still be alive. Liam Conejo should not be detained, a 5-year-old, out of state, away from his home. An agency that kills people, ignores court's orders, and terrorizes cities has no place in democracy. Abolish ICE and have solidarity with your communities.